If you can play Chopin, I'll marry you. Smirked the CEO. What the janitor did left her speechless. The guests in the grand ballroom laughed as the young CEO, Leela Devereux, leaned lazily against the gleaming black grand piano. Her couture gown shimmered under the chandelier, her glass of champagne catching the light as she scanned the crowd. Chopin, she said with a smirk. No one here can play it well. If you can, I'll marry you. It was a joke to her, a challenge meant for the high-profile musicians, artists, and trust fund prodigies mingling at her charity gala. No one moved, until a man in a worn gray janitor's uniform, still holding a mop, stepped forward. The room tittered. Oh, this should be good, someone whispered. The janitor, mid-40s, tall, with calloused hands and faint streaks of cleaning solution on his shirt, set the mop aside and walked to the piano. He didn't speak. He just sat down, his posture straightening in a way that didn't match his humble role. Then his fingers touched the keys, the first notes of Chopin's ballad No. 1 poured out like molten gold. It wasn't just correct. It was alive. Every crescendo was a wave, every pause a heartbeat, every arpeggio a gasp in the crowd. The laughter stopped. The champagne glasses were forgotten. Even Lila, the CEO who had spent her life surrounded by privilege and talent, found herself gripping the piano's edge, her pulse quickening. When the final chord faded into the marble silence, the janitor stood. You keep your proposal, ma'am, he said quietly. I already have someone I've loved for 20 years. He picked up his mop and left. While whispers rippled through the room, Lila later learned the truth. Daniel Reyes, once a world-touring pianist, had vanished from the spotlight after a car accident took his wife's life. He'd taken the janitor job at the venue to stay close to the music, without having to face the stage again. That night, her challenge had brought him back and humbled her in front of everyone. She never looked at ordinary people the same way again. The chandelier bathed the ballroom in warm gold, casting glittering light across the crowd of elite investors, diplomats, and celebrities. It was the annual Devereux Foundation Gala, a place where billion-dollar deals were whispered over wine and fortunes were cemented with handshakes. At the front of the room, a sleek black Steinway grand piano gleamed like a jewel. Lila Devereux, the 29-year-old CEO and heiress, tapped its lid with a manicured finger, champagne in hand. Anyone here play? She asked coyly, her voice ringing through the microphone. Let's make it fun, Chopin. Not the easy stuff. Ballade. No. 1. In G minor. Her smile curved into a challenge. If you can play it flawlessly, I'll marry you. Laughter erupted. Some thought she was joking. Others thought it was just a stunt for attention. In the corner, a janitor in a gray uniform was quietly mopping the marble floor. His badge read Daniel. His hair was peppered with gray, and his hands were calloused from years of hard labor. He froze mid-swipe. Come on, Leela teased the crowd. No one. All these self-proclaimed geniuses in the room, and I can. The voice was deep and steady. Every head turned toward the janitor. You, a man in a tuxedo, chuckled. Mate, this isn't chopsticks. This is Chopin. Daniel didn't answer. He set the mop against the wall and walked to the piano. The guests parted for him, some smirking, others whispering. Leela leaned against the lid, amused. All right, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Reyes, she said, mockingly formal. If you're going to embarrass yourself, I suggest doing it quickly. He sat down, his posture suddenly transforming, no longer the quiet, hunched figure sweeping in the shadows. His fingers hovered above the keys like a man about to command an army. Then, the first notes came. It wasn't playing, it was storytelling. The melody swelled and broke like ocean waves, each note dripping with emotion, longing, loss, and defiance. The room went silent, except for the sound of his hands dancing over the keys. Halfway through, Leela's smirk faded. Her champagne glass lowered. She felt something. A tightness in her chest she couldn't name. When the final chords faded into stillness, no one moved. Daniel stood, giving a small nod toward Lila. "Keep your proposal, ma'am. I've been married for 20 years, to a woman I'll never stop loving, even if she's gone." He picked up his mop and returned to work as if nothing had happened. Later, Lila learned the truth. Daniel Reyes had been a world-renowned pianist, playing in the most prestigious concert halls on earth. But after his wife died in a car accident, he abandoned the stage. He took the janitor job at the gala venue just to be near music, without having to face it again. Her joke had pulled him back into the light for the first time in a decade, and for the first time in her privileged life, Lila realized greatness doesn't always wear a designer suit. The Devereux Foundation Gala was the event of the year. The ballroom of the Royal Carlton Hotel dripped in gold crystal chandeliers, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and tables dressed with imported orchids. The air buzzed with money, power, and the kind of laughter that only came from people who'd never known hunger. At the far end of the hall stood a polished Steinway Grand, its black lacquer reflecting the glow of the lights. Lila Devereux, 29, heiress to a shipping fortune and newly minted CEO, stood beside it, in a sapphire gown that costs more than some people's homes. She was sharp-featured, beautiful, and radiated the confidence of someone who had always been the center of the room. She tapped the piano's lid with a manicured finger, drawing everyone's eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice smooth, "we've been raising funds all night, but let's have a little fun." She sipped champagne, smirking. "I have a challenge." Chopin ballade. "No. 1 in G minor. Play it flawlessly." She paused, her eyes glinting. "And I'll marry you." The crowd erupted with laughter. A few men puffed their chests, but no one stepped forward. "It's one of the hardest pieces ever written," a tuxedoed banker muttered to his date. "Exactly," Lila said with mock sweetness. "Let's separate the real talent from the posers." In the far corner, a man in a worn janitor's uniform pushed a mop across the marble. Daniel Reyes, 45. Broad shoulders, hands rough from years of hard work. His hair, peppered with silver, clung damply to his forehead from the long shift. He froze. "I can," he said quietly. The chatter in the room stopped. Heads turned. Some smirked. Others chuckled outright. "You." Lila tilted her head. "Mr. Reyes." "Well, Mr. Reyes," she said with a dry smile, "I do admire confidence. Please, entertain us." A businessman near the bar whispered, "This is going to be painful." Daniel didn't respond. He walked toward the piano, each step deliberate. When he sat down, the change in his posture was instant. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, his fingers hovered over the keys as though greeting an old friend. And then, the first notes rang out. It wasn't just technically perfect, it was alive. The melody swelled like ocean waves, crashing with fury, and then retreating with aching tenderness. His hands blurred over the keys, every movement purposeful, each pause pregnant with meaning. The ballroom transformed. The chandeliers didn't just shine. They listened. The air itself seemed to lean closer. By the halfway mark, Lila's smirk had vanished. She sat frozen, champagne glass forgotten in her lap, her throat tight. She'd heard Chopin before, from the best pianists. Money could hire, but this was different. This was raw, human, bleeding. When the final chord faded into the silence, no one dared move. The moment felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with a breath. Daniel stood. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that stilled the room. "Keep your proposal, ma'am. I've been married for 20 years, to a woman I'll love, until my last day, even if she's no longer here." He walked back to his mop, his footsteps the only sound in the hushed hall. Lila sat motionless, heart hammering. She wanted to speak, to ask, who was she? How did you learn to play like that? But he was already gone, disappearing into the service hallway. The truth later that night Curiosity got the better of her. She asked the hotel manager about the janitor. Daniel Reyes, once hailed as the poet of the piano, had toured the world before vanishing from the music scene 12 years ago. The reason was whispered among those who knew him. A car accident had claimed his wife, Alina, and shattered his will to perform. He'd sold their home, vanished from the spotlight, and taken quiet custodial work in places with pianos, just so he could be near the music without having to face it. Her thoughtless challenge had pulled him back, if only for a few minutes. The change the following year, the gala was different. The Steinway was no longer just decor. In the middle of the night's program, the lights dimmed, and Lila herself stepped onto the stage. Last year, she told the audience, "I learned that true greatness doesn't come dressed in designer suits. Sometimes, it wears a janitor's uniform." She invited Daniel on stage, not as staff, but as the evening's performer. That night, the man who had once hidden in the shadows played for the world again, and when the final note hung in the air, Lila wasn't smirking. She was on her feet, leading a standing ovation, her eyes bright with something far more real than amusement.